Here are three different scenarios that I'm still looking at when it comes to ZBCN during maybe a fully fledged type of hypothetical altcoin season, if we ever even do see one, even though nothing I say is financial advice. Now, the first scenario that I'm looking at is the idea of 5 cents. Now, keep in mind, I still have the mindset of 10 cents, but at the same time, I do want to discuss this as kind of like a make-believe, maybe worst-case scenario in my perspective. Now, at the price of 5 cents, considering current circulating supply, market cap at that point would be around $4.5 billion. So it's nothing really that ridiculous. I mean, we've seen Dogecoin reach over $80 billion in terms of market cap, and that was back in 2021. So it's nothing too, I think, groundbreaking. And also, 5 cents is around an 11.5x from here, give or take. And some people may be thinking, okay, who cares about that? Well, I actually care about that because even though, granted, it's not going to be the best hypothetical upside out there of all time, and how can it, right? I mean, around an 11.5x from here, it's not going to be that way. But then at the same time, I really don't mind in the grand scheme of things because if Bitcoin went to 300 grand, less than a 3x from here, and if Ethereum went to 10 grand, that's also still less than a 3x from here. So it's nothing necessarily that I'm going to be complaining about if, let's say, it ever even does do that. And also, I do like the fundamentals when it comes to Zebec, and let me explain why. Because, for instance, the Zebec network, we have to consider how it has this vibe of payments and global trade and finance. By the way, these are two markets that are also focused on when it comes to Ripple and Stellar. So in the grand scheme of things, I kind of view this as somewhat a miniature version of Ripple and Stellar. However, this is just my mindset. Why does this even matter? It's because the payments market is currently valued at over $2 trillion, and the global trade and finance market is predicted to reach up to $5 trillion in value by 2028, according to Mordor Intelligence. So it's a pretty good market, I think, arguably to be focused on, or should I say markets, plural. But even besides that, if I take a look at the competitors beyond Ripple and Stellar, there really doesn't seem to be that many that are that, I would say kind of popular. Let me explain why. If we take a look at the market cap for XRP and XLM, it's very massive, right? So I don't think ZBCN is ever overtaking that. But if we take a look at the alternatives beyond that, like projects that are focused on payments and global trade and finance, I think arguably there are 5 recognizable ones, including ZBCN, which of course, again, I take a look at the Zebec network, aka ZBCN, it's one of them. We take a look at XCN, aka Onyx Coin. That's another one, so that's 2. We take a look at also XPR, Swift Coin. That's 4, right? But the 5th one, in no specific order, and I think arguably this is actually the most popular one instead of XRP and XLM, and that's something called XDC. And again, that's 5 right there. I don't think that's that many, especially considering kind of the size of the payments market that I mentioned before, and also the global trade and finance market, and as to what it could very well be moving forward. And we have to consider, I don't think every single person who wants to believe in payments and global trade and finance, kind of that sector, that area, I don't think everyone necessarily just wants to kind of latch on to XRP and XLM because their market caps are very massive. It may not be necessarily everyone's cup of tea, so to speak. So then at the same time, if there's arguably like 5 recognizable competitors, I don't think it's that bad. I don't think ZBCN is under some stiff competition, if that makes sense, because if it's, let's say, in like the NFT space or decentralized finance or like blockchain gaming where there's like 20 or 30 reputable competitors that are pretty famous, then that's a different case. It's kind of easy to become oversaturated, or should I say kind of unrecognizable maybe for a project if, let's say, there's that many reputable competitors. But then in this case, there's not like too many, I think, arguably in terms of the popular competitors. So I do like the positioning when it comes to Zebec. Not to mention, Zebec is focused on AI-based payment finance. Why do I think it's a big deal? It's because the AI market is predicted to reach nearly $2 trillion by 2030, according to Granby Research. So it's pretty massive. We also take a look at, for instance, Zebec. It's focused on something called RWAs. Now, I think some people have already kind of heard about this because RWA stands for Real World Asset, and this seems to kind of be a trend that's going on. We take a look at, for instance, something like Ondo, which is heavily focused on RWAs, and we've seen how popular that became, historically speaking. I get it, a lot of projects out there having a pullback, but Ondo is still pretty massive, and we have to take a look at, for instance, let's say RWA tokens. They're digital representations of physical assets on the blockchain. So, for instance, they can be for market sectors like real estate, let's say stocks, bonds, something like art even. I mean, there's a bunch of possibilities, but I'm just saying. And again, a digital representation of a physical asset on the blockchain. I think that's pretty impressive if you ask me. And also, let's take a look at Zebec's focus on payrolls. Now, people may be thinking, okay, who cares about payrolls? Well, Zebec arguably, I think, is focused on something called instant payrolls. Now, why is this kind of, I think, again, pretty interesting? It's because, for instance, when I was working a part-time job back in college, like I'd have to wait like 2 weeks, right? And sure, some people may prefer that, some people may not prefer that, but then arguably, some do prefer that not having to wait 2 weeks. Like, what happens if there is a way to arguably have instant payrolls and not having to wait like 2 weeks, right? And that is kind of basically somewhat a focus, I think, when it comes to Zebec. Again, instant payrolls. Again, not every single enterprise, for instance, may want to necessarily adopt that type of instant payroll type of vibe, but I still think it's a good way to have another option. It doesn't mean that it has to be chosen, but then at least it has that option. I do find that pretty interesting and pretty cool because, again, imagine not having to wait that long. I think in some cases it may sound kind of cool to some people, but in some cases, again, others may not prefer it. But again, at least there's that option. Also, Zebec is focused on the cards, or should I say the Zebec cards, which I think is pretty impressive considering what it's done with something like, for instance, Bonk, which is a Solana-based meme coin, which is pretty popular. We take a look at, again, what Zebec cards have kind of done when it comes to something like, Algorand, which is a pretty popular, project as well. And we take a look at how the Zebec cards, it is powered by MasterCard. It supports multiple blockchains. Like, for instance, we take a look at even the Base network, which is Coinbase's layer 2, which is kind of gaining in popularity as well. So I think that's pretty awesome. And again, having Zebec cards, it's nothing necessarily groundbreaking because even meme coins out there have cards as well. It's nothing like really that, I think, revolutionary. But I do like how Zebec at least has those aspects nonetheless. And keep in mind, the cherry on top for me is that Zebec, allegedly one of its early backers, is something called Solana Ventures. And I think that's pretty awesome considering how when it comes to ZBCN not too long ago, it was top 10 in terms of utility when it comes to Solana. So not only does it have this kind of Ripple and Stellar vibe, but it also has that Solana aspect. So I do like that. Not to mention, another one of, should I say, Zebec's backers, and this is actually Zebec's early backers allegedly, and that is something called Circle, which is the creator of USDC, and also on top of that, Circle is publicly listed. So we got to imagine that. On top of all that, right, it doesn't end there though, because Circle allegedly holds a significant amount of ZBCN, and this is not even according to me. It's not something that I observed or something like that. It's something that I saw on, Zebec themselves. They posted it on X, and they said how, again, Circle allegedly holds a significant amount of ZBCN. So I find that pretty interesting. I mean, I don't think Circle needs to be selling any ZBCN anytime soon. Quite frankly, I don't even know if they need Zebec at all. I mean, they're already massive. Take a look at USDC. Does it really need any more aspects to it when it comes to Circle? Who knows? But again, I do like the whole vibe when it comes to Zebec. And when people, again, like to ask me maybe the idea of arguably 5 cents, or should I say I don't really view it as something that is too, I would say, outlandish, maybe as a worst case, arguably, only time will tell. And now, the second scenario that I still have on my mind is 7.5 cents. Now, why don't I find this too kind of outlandish? It's because market cap, considering current circulating supply at that point, would be around 6.8 billion. So nearly 7 billion for simplicity's sake, but again, around 6.8 billion. It is around a 17.5x from here. We saw XRP not too long ago reach a market cap of around 200 billion. So this market cap isn't even 5% of that. So I don't find this too ridiculous, however, only time will tell. Now, my third and final kind of mindset that I still have, or should I say scenario, is still 10 cents. Now, again, that is around a 23x from here, give or take. Market cap at that point would be around $9 billion, which again, I don't think is too ridiculous considering how XRP not too long ago, just like I mentioned not too long ago as well, reached around a market cap of around 200 billion. And also we've seen like Dogecoin reach over $80 billion in market cap. We saw Shiba Inu reach around 40 billion as well. And that was back in 2021, also in the case of Dogecoin, by the way. So it's nothing really that, I think, kind of outlandish, but this is just my mindset. Now, some people out there may be wondering, okay, how soon? Now, I don't think I will be able to know the exact moment in time, and how can I? I do not know the future, but at least I can take a look back in history. Altcoins usually, as a worst case scenario, they typically peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event, and the last Bitcoin halving event happened in April of last year, so 18 months on top of that, that's around October this year. Now, that's just based off history. It could maybe happen later, like November, December, even Q1 of next year. It's not really a set date because, again, who knows? That's just based off history. But whenever that timeline does happen, what I'm going to be doing, or should I say, if it ever even does, what I'm going to be doing is very simple. I'm going to stick with my strategy. And what is that? My strategy is just dollar cost averaging, holding and just waiting. That's it. So to me, by doing that, I'm able to kind of be there in a moment where maybe hypothetically ZBCN does something, because I don't want to find the exact moment in time. What I do want to do is just prepare for a moment in time, if that makes sense. And I'm not going to be pulling up some random price chart, drawing some random triangle, or drawing a falling wedge pattern, because quite frankly, I don't know if that does anything for me. Like, if I do that, will I be able to know what's going to happen moving forward? No. Is the market going to care about that? Also no. So what's the point for me? I see some people out there, they pull up a price chart, draw some random triangle. They say it's going to happen at this time. It doesn't. And they keep adjusting the triangle. Now at that point, it's just drawing. That's not my vibe. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be just randomly drawing triangles on a price chart and not focusing on the fundamentals, because I do focus on the fundamentals and I like the community when it comes to Zebec. And that right there are 3 scenarios that I'm still looking at for ZBC, and maybe if we ever do see a fully fledged type of hypothetical altcoin season. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I greatly appreciate it. It's Mali the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.